Hello, my name is Michael O'Keefe, aka The Movie List. If you enjoy this interview and want to hear more top-notch film industry conversations, please press the thumbs up, subscribe to this channel, and hit the bell to stay in the know. Hello, Stefan Forbes. What compelled you to make the documentary Hold Your Fire?
All right. I've been looking for a story about conflict resolution for about a decade. And then a friend told me about this event back in '73 that I'd never heard of. It was super dramatic. There's guns blazing in the streets of Brooklyn in a battle that people liken to Vietnam or World War II. I was interested, but then when he told me about Harvey Schlossberg, here in this, top-down authoritarian macho world of the NYPD, where, it's basically a paramilitary organization full of big, tough guys. There's this 99-pound weakling, this nonviolent, pacifist Jewish intellectual beat cop with a PhD in psychology. Mm-hmm. I'm like, what? How can this be? Tell me more. And I was kind of hooked on the story. I had no idea how long it would take me to figure out what really happened, but I wanted to find out.
And who was this friend who told you about the story?
It's funny. He was a Hollywood guy. He's like, maybe you could make a film about this guy. He's a psychologist. He works for the NYPD. And I said, well, was he ever involved with anything dramatic? He said, I don't think so, but he wrote a book. You could get his book. He's just a really fascinating dude. So I said, you're sure there's no interest? He said, no, there's a book. And I got the book, and on page one, it was on September 19th, January 19th, 1973, 4 young African-American men walked into a sporting goods store to steal guns for self-defense, and the police mistook them for the Black Liberation Army, and thus began the longest hostage siege in NYPD history. And I was like, okay, in true Hollywood style, not only did you not read the book, but you didn't even open the book. That was on page one. There's something kind of dramatic here. And from then on, once I started reading about the siege, I looked. A sort of similar.
Got it. When you finish any projects like as director, I guess, how does it feel? What do you do to celebrate when it's all done?
You get your friends together, you hoist some glasses of champagne, and you celebrate, and you try to appreciate the fact that here's this incredible visionary, Harvey Schlossberg, who, we've lived through all these tragedies, Ferguson, Missouri, we've lived through, George Floyd, all these moments in America of violence and mistrust and grief as a nation and anger. And when you discover that 47 years ago, this visionary psychologist came up with a solution to all this stuff, and there are guys in the NYPD who are profound, intuitive Zen masters who diffuse and de-escalate conflict, but this isn't taught to most police, and almost no one throughout the American police force has ever even heard of Schloss. When you have the chance to tell that story, not only to America but to the world, continue to save lives as Harvey did, that's a cause for celebration. So just the fact that this movie's done and it's going to get out there, we're all really celebrating in a deep way.
And how do you feel that robots now do the hostage negotiation sometimes?
I'm sorry, what do you mean by that?
Well, with the Texas sniper back in 2016, a robot negotiated with him, and then it didn't work out, and the robot exploded, killing him. And I was wondering what you thought about hostage negotiation done by AI.
Well, they're trying to do psychology with web apps as well, and I think there's a place, people will do meditation when their phone reminds them to. So, I'm not a total Luddite with this stuff, but, in the West, we often think we can solve problems just by throwing technology at them. There's always some tech solution. And, if you have an active shooter or there's a case where bullets are flying or people are actually being killed, that's not a time for talking. And you might need some kind of robot. But in general, I think we go to violence and domination way too soon. And, looking at this siege, bullets are flying. Harvey was able to say, hey, these guys may seem like our enemy. Let's talk to them. Let's find out who they really are. Let's find out what's going on in their minds. And he practiced a form of deep listening, which is profoundly transformative. And it's actually what I try to do as a filmmaker. I just want to listen to people, tell me your story. And oftentimes, if people really feel heard, they're able to verbalize things they might not have even realized before that they felt. It happened last night at our world premiere screening. One of my producers, Amir Sultani, who's from Iran, some guy was asking him about that in the audience. And he said, well, my country was actually shaped by a hostage siege. And we were all like, oh my God, that's right. 1979, the hostages. He had never made that connection before. And it came out of him through a really thoughtful question from the audience. So I'm always of the belief that if we, maybe stop talking and ask a few questions and listen a little more, things can really open up.
That's really interesting. The sort of deep tissue approach, I guess.
Yeah.
So did you conduct the majority of the interviews seen in Hold Your Fire?
I would have to say a 100% majority.
Oh, okay then. No delegating.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no delegate. I do my own work, man.
Nice. And did you ever find some of the cops' comments to be a little callous and frustrating?
Of course. But, by the same token, it's also really beautiful that these guys trusted me and they opened up enough to do stuff like talk about race, which, most cops really hate to do. They feel like it's talked about too much. They have there's a wide range of opinions among something as huge as a police force, of course. And there are many officers of color who have different views, but your average, Irish, white cop from the 60s and 70s, talking about race is the last thing they want to do. But they opened up with me and they went there into some really messy, difficult, disturbing conversations. And I feel like it's only when we do that we're going to be able to move forward as a society.
Yeah, definitely. You can't deny people, their experience or, how they view the world. That's just going to make them dig a little deeper.
Exactly. Yeah.
Absolutely. So tell me about the filmmaking approach of the documentary, because I found the cuts to often be very captivating.
Yeah, well, thank you. This was a brutally hard story to tell because the deeper that I dug, the more perspectives that I uncovered on this, traumatic incident, the more it was like, wow, this really doesn't fit together, does it? And you've got to be really thoughtful where you have people contradict each other on screen, because if they do it too much, it's like we can't even agree that the sky is blue and up is down. People need to settle into a coherent narrative, which is incredibly hard to do in a case this complicated that lasted for 47 hours. It was, prolonged by miscommunications, mistaken identity, misunderstandings, lack of communication, which persisted to this day. And people would often ask me, well, what actually happened there? I thought it was this, or they'd launch into, that, actually, no, that didn't happen. So people were just as curious for what I was hearing from other people at the scene. None of them had been able to make sense of it. And, a lot of times what's in the newspaper is just the first draft of history. As a documentary filmmaker, we have a chance to go back, maybe dig a little deeper and rewrite some of that. And, it was a case that was so complicated that the judge in the courtroom actually took the entire jury and the defendants back to that sporting goods store to walk around and try to visualize what happened, because they couldn't visualize it in their mind. And when I heard about that, it really rang true to me, because as a filmmaker, I have to create this entire interior space with just these old crime photos. I have to portray 1,000 angry cops surrounding this store with sniper rifles and emergency vehicles. And then beyond them, a further perimeter of Puerto Rican and Hispanic community of color who's out there really resentful of the police presence in their neighborhood. And it's a powder keg waiting to go off. And there's all these different layers and levels of this story. There's different actors. People would be confused, for months and months watching the cut and saying, something as simple as a pronoun. When you say they started shooting, well, who started shooting? Who was talking on the bullhorn? Was it the cops? Was it the negotiators? Was it, the crowd? Was it someone inside the building? So there's so much going on that every segue, every edit, every cut was something that I ended up laboring over in the edit, just to, again, tell a coherent narrative where people could actually follow this complex tale.
Fascinating. Would you work on a feature film of this movie, of this story?
Yeah, we have so much interest right now. It's been amazing, and one thing, people are interested in is doing like a limited series for TV, a dramatic series, because I had to cut out so many things that happened there, just these incredible stories. And I would tell people, what happened Saturday night, blah, blah, blah. They'd be like, what? You have to put that in there. And I'm like, I can't. It's 94 minutes, there's just no way I can tell all these crazy stories of what happened when Shuaib went to prison. He went upstate for 40 years. The Nation of Islam was trying to kill him. There is drama in this guy's life throughout. And, when he got out, he was seen as a cop killer. And the tabloids in New York were, really demonized him. And the other side of the story hadn't really been told, that that bullet was never matched to any gun. And nobody knows for sure who killed Officer Gilroy. So there's a lot of interest, just because there's these incredible characters and there's so much more story left to tell too. So that's fun for us.
So people will obviously have a subjective experience watching this documentary, but what do you want audiences to take away from Hold Your Fire?
I think ultimately, I hate to preach. I never want to tell anyone what to think. Nobody likes films with a message, eat your oatmeal. But this film is so dramatic and violent and dark and so full of unremitting hostility and, toxic masculinity, people seeking to dominate each other with guns. And these guys stuck in the building who have no way to really speak to anyone outside except by firing a gun. It's so tragic and so almost hopeless that in this third act of the movie, when they're able to establish communication and, Harvey is able to walk into this tinderbox and avert a bloodbath and get everyone out alive. It's so incredibly uplifting that, I would really love being an American where we tend to see violence as the solution to things. And we're so fractured as a country right now. When you look at January 6th, I would love it if people could just think, hey, this story, somehow it managed to fit everyone in. We're all in there. We have different views, but we're all listening to each other. Some of the cops were extremely moved by hearing Shuaib's story, when I showed them clips of him. And, in many ways, they think he's the enemy, but that his story was able to move them. And I would love it if people were able to enlarge our vision of how we see others. And, as we move forward, if we want to have a democracy, it's about listening to other people. And it's about creating a national story that fits everyone in, and that, we can coexist even if we have huge disagreements. That's what a democracy is about. Maybe we can practice a little bit of that deep listening that Harvey showed us in the movies is the way out of even the darkest situation. If people can just take away that sense from the movie, I think it can be really, really transformative.
That was a very eloquent answer, and I really appreciate your time, Stefan. Final question. Are you happy to be included in TIFF this year?
Oh my God, it's an incredible honor, just to be selected by Tom Powers, who is an internationally renowned programmer, for him to see this film and invite us, it doesn't get any better than that, because I have so much respect for his taste. Seeing the other incredible films that he's programmed up here, to be able to bring this film to Toronto was a huge honor for all of us.
That's wonderful. Well, I hope you have a great day and, career for the next project, right?
Yeah, man. Appreciate it. Thank you so much for having me on.
My pleasure.